Hello, and thanks for watching another Sunday case study. This Sunday, we're looking at Vladimir Putin. I'm using his head and shoulders. Looks like I'm waving to you all. Hello. Right. So, just looking at his palm, he's a fire hand. I mean, he's the typical sort of motivational, blunt, no nonsense type of person, and you can see that by the angle of his thumb here. He's not the sort of person that would listen to any nonsense about a palm reading, that's for sure. And the thickness of his fingers as well, the overall thickness shows us that he hasn't got any time for any of the small talk. Just get to the point, man. Stop messing me around. Fire hands typically, they're not interested in the finer details, in analysing things for long periods of time, long discussions. They just want the conclusion. Just give me results. Speak English, doctor. You know, they're the sort of people who can look at the overall situation and make a judgment based from they're able to see the whole picture and what needs to be done, and make an assessment very quickly. They're doers rather than thinkers. He's got a strong thumb, and by that I mean, it's well developed. Willpower is, it's longer and thicker than logic. These little green lines aren't helping here. It's a longer section of willpower than logic, which shows really that he's more likely to do. It's only just longer, but it is longer. He's more likely to do the pushing around than to get pushed around, and that's kind of obvious and evident with the other signs that I've just mentioned earlier. He's a no-nonsense person, quite blunt, destructive when needed. That's the typical way to sort of sum up a fire hand. They can be quite destructive in relationships and friendships, but sometimes it's necessary. They'll say what needs to be said, whereas others will sort of shy away from it. The Jupiter finger is well developed, particularly the tip of Jupiter. It's very sort of forward thrusting and quite sort of phallic looking, and this well developed tip of Jupiter, it shows someone who is able to make decisions, very big decisions, very quickly and very well. And it also shows, and I say quick decisions because it's rounded, but it's the longer of the three phalanges on Jupiter. Jupiter's wide at the bottom, and which shows that he's compensating for a mild inferiority complex through drinking and womanizing, and that's evident by other areas of his palm. The base of Apollo is weak, whereas Jupiter is strong. He's a man's man. He's much more inclined to get along and understand men than women. His love language is physical, which probably explains why he's not been particularly successful in long-term relationships. At least that's what his palm has said in other images I've analysed. The long section of the first phalanx of Jupiter indicates actually quite a strong sort of spiritual leanings in philosophical and spiritual understanding. So I think actually he's probably quite spiritual, religious. That's the word I'm looking for. And I think that in his leadership qualities, this is probably shines through as well. He's probably leading with this. Now, I don't know if you can notice here, but there's a bit of a bulge here, and you notice it in other images as well. And this is a much more recent picture, and you can tell because his face is a lot wider. In more recent times, his face has just gotten a lot wider. And in just looking for images on Vladimir Putin, online, I've seen lots of articles of misinformation coming out saying things like he's got a body double. This isn't a real Putin, but actually the hands tell a different story. The palms say otherwise. This is the same person. His face has changed dramatically very recently due to health conditions, which I've sort of gotten to the bottom of as well during my findings. But what I wanted to point out was you can see here there's a slight bulge with particularly Saturn and Jupiter, and this shows that he... just get rid of those. That, this is drinking. This is an issue that's arise through drinking, and it's a problem with his gallbladder and his liver, and that's also evident in the Mercury line as well, and what that's telling us. And I'll get I'll get around to explaining that a little bit more. But fingers wise, the tips of his fingers are very well developed, which is interesting because all spiritual leaders have this sort of quality. And as I've mentioned, he's quite a religious sort of person, and the tip of Mercury is quite strong as well. And as you would imagine, this is an ability. It shows, it's a long Mercury as well. It reaches above the first phalanx of Apollo, and that indicates a strong ability to communicate and express in front of more than one people, and an ability to eloquently articulate, get his point across, and persuade others as well. The first phalanx of Mercury is longer than the others, and that shows that he's as I say, articulate, he's eloquent, but also some sort of love of science or perhaps industry. And I'm leaning more towards industry. He's got some other qualities of an industrious man. And what else can we say here? Mercury leans slightly towards Apollo, especially only slightly, but the tip especially, it kind of hints towards expression. It is leaning more towards artistic appreciation and beauty. And as I say, Apollo, the base of Apollo finger here is not very well developed, but the base of Jupiter is. So this physical domination, so physical challenges he readily accepts, and that's because he's a Martian, as in his planetary qualities lie strongly with Mars. And physical prowess is certainly one of his traits. His love language is physical. So these sort of signs show someone that is quite sort of domineering in relationships, physically and otherwise. And I think that this is where some of his issues might arise. I think he sees sex as love, potentially, and doesn't quite fully understand the female of the species. Another note to mention just before we move on about the fingers here is that Saturn is quite low. It's quite a short Saturn, and that shows a bit of a free bird, actually, a bit of a free spirit, someone who is not interested in bureaucracy, which is interesting because he's a world leader. He is not interested in the rules. As I say, that goes hand in hand with being a fire hand as well, and having the thickness of the fingers. He just wants the conclusion. He wants the end result. He's not interested in the fine print. And this short Saturn is always, you'll always see it in ironically, you'll always see it in sort of hippies Charles Manson had a very short Saturn finger. You don't see it with people who are great lovers of bureaucracy and rules. You see it in rule breakers. Apollo is on the longish side. Jupiter is not short, but Apollo is slightly longer than Jupiter, which you can see here. So this does sort of indicate that, and also there's quite a larger space between Apollo and Saturn, between the heart line. This shows he really does care about what people think about him. Now this is an interesting image, just to prove that we're still on Putin here. So you can see here that clearly his heart line is quite sort of wavy. He's got a Mars line here. What looks like, it's really quite hard to tell, but either a fate line rising from Venus, or in fact a secondary Mars line, or perhaps a secondary lifeline with just some sort of trauma there from the heart to the lifeline. There's a lot going on here, but we'll just talk about what we can and what makes sense. So the lifeline stems from Jupiter, this place of ambition, and it shows a desire to rise to the top. It shows a desire to, obviously, we've already discussed being a fire hand. He's ambitious, and that's what it shows. It shows his life is kind of set on a course for ambition and expansion and elevation. It shows a life that's almost sort of predestined for promotion. Now, just looking at his left hand, you can see here again the lifeline stems from Jupiter, which adds to this the strength of this claim that he is always on a course for promotion and rising and elevation and ambition. And the health line here, it appears to rise up towards Mercury. It's from the lifeline. There is also an escape line here, and that ties in with this alcoholism and womanization. But the Mercury line, ironically, this is known as a protection from vampires in Russian palmistry, which is, I say it's ironic because we're looking at a Russian. And this is taken very seriously in Russia. I think Russians have something like 35 names for vampires. They don't joke about it. But what this really means is actually it aids a person with a sense of, I don't really know how else to say it, but luck. It provides luck in a person's life, in dealings with physical traumas, and there certainly appears to be a physical trauma right here, because on the headline where the Mercury line, or the health line, or intuition line, or liver line as it's sometimes known as, we can see that where the cross-section meets, there's a bit of a sort of an explosion. And this is, you often see this with soldiers, people who have seen combat and suffered with some sort of PTSD or shell shock, as now it's obviously known as PTSD. And after the headline makes, it forks, so it shows that whatever this was, it's changed his perceptions. He's now able to see things from more than one angle. It's certainly shaken him up, and I think it's impacted his health physically as well as mentally. You can see a great dip in the health line directly above it, a large sort of circle there, and a circle on the health line, on the heart line. Sorry, it certainly seems to suggest towards some sort of blood ailment, and that's curious because being, having this pronounced Mars um, positive and negative as well. As I say, he's a Martian. His area, his planetary strength is Mars, and that coincides with this soldier attitude, which is very typical of a um, I was going to say a fire, but actually that's not necessarily true. But with this sort of person, the typical ailments of a Martian, as it were, are skin or blood disease. And so you've got the circle here, and that's a secondary clue here. And if we look over on his right hand, so this is a more current view of things, you can see how the heart line is really quite wavy, and again this suggests a blood or circulatory issue. So now we've got three signs here, we've got three clues, and then I was sort of drawn back to all these articles popping up of him having these body doubles because he looks like a completely different person. Well, this is due to the condition that he's got, that he's dealing with at the moment. I think it was always going to be the case, but drinking certainly isn't helping this. And you can see that the liver line or the Mercury line it's this area, and I don't know if this is just the color of the picture here, it's quite yellowish, and a yellowish sort of palm. It sort of shows a bilious nature, but also in this area in particular, the liver is having issues. It can show some signs of liver issues, and or even at worst cirrhosis of the liver. And if you compare the colors of the palms, just look again. I don't know if this is just a lighting issue here, but look how sort of pink normal the left hand looks compared to with his right hand. We've got some discoloration going on here, and again this is another sign of blood issues, or it's tied in with the liver at the very least, and the health line tails off towards the gallbladder, sort of pointing towards. It's almost as if the Mercury line here, the health line, is sort of saying, well, enough's enough, please, I've had enough now. Look, my gallbladder is having an issue, look over here, stop this. That's sort of what it's saying. So that's absolutely fascinating. Now, the Mars line here is very strong. I'll show you another image. So a person with a strong Mars line, this is it's a fortunate sign, really, because it allows a person to act courageously. Soldiers have this, and of course he was a soldier. It means a person who has a strong Mars, negative and positive, along with this strong Mars line, it certainly indicates towards someone who's courageous, who accepts physical challenges, and all challenges, really. A person who challenges just full stop. He's quite a challenging person by nature. If information is presented to him, he'll quite often sort of say, well, why is this the case? How have you come to this conclusion? In a very sort of blunt manner. And it's not necessarily because he's trying to be confrontational. He's just trying to understand this is his way, and this is his way of developing himself as well. A person with a strong Mars line like this it's excellent to have a person like this on your side. You don't want to cross this person, but to have them as an ally, excellent, because they'll fight for you to the ends of the earth. They'll, if they're a close friend, they'll give you their life for you, and because of this, certainly in military profession. This can help a person rise quite quickly and be respected and honoured by peers and colleagues. So a Mars line like this is incredibly useful because it's known as a guardian angel line sometimes when we go through times of sickness or a court case. A Mars line is extremely helpful because it allows us to fight those battles. But when we have a Mars line that's too deep, that's too strong, that's too long, it can sort of take over our nature, and that battle, it can get a bit out of hand. We need to fight sometimes for ourselves or for others, those we love, but sometimes it can get out of hand, and we need to know when to stop fighting. And so a Mars line like this shows that possible violence or over sort of physical tendencies in matters of sex, and sometimes even at worst murderous tendencies. And so I'm not necessarily saying that this is the case, because when you're fighting a war, you need to have a Mars line. You need to have this extra assistance alongside you. But it's questionable as to whether or not this is a healthy sign, having it so deep and so strong and so long as well. And whilst we're on the subject of war, and I suppose this person, this case study is fairly controversial in a way, because he's obviously an enemy of the West and I'm a Westerner. And I'm trying to be impartial because I don't really want to any sort of judgment from what I may have seen in Western media cloud this reading. Because initially when I looked at this person's palm, I thought to myself, well, do you know what? I don't see a tyrannical leader. I don't see a sociopath. I don't see a psychopath. I don't even see an angry person. I mean, there are, there's possibilities for, flashes of anger, but all in all, I see a person who's managing to keep that they're actually a very well-balanced person. There's no twisted, warped nature. This is certainly a person who's able to persuade and manipulate others, but not necessarily to nefarious ends. So, when I looked at this person's palm, I thought, hang on a minute, I don't see a problem here at all. I do see a very industrious and a very physical person, a person who might let his physical sort of tendencies to get out of hand. But I don't necessarily see any of the things that Western media is kind of pointing out, and it kind of got me thinking, about other things altogether, and then sort of maybe start questioning everything. But I do see, as I say, there are some violent tendencies here, and I think that's actually necessary. If you're a soldier, you need to be able to exhibit, and draw out these tendencies. It's a necessity of war to be a violent person. But the heartline here actually shows someone that he does have a caring nature. I don't see any of the other classic signs of a sociopath or psychopath or a tyrannical despot. I do see actually a person here who's got, there are some idealistic traits within what he expects in a partner. And with these little sort of, lines stroking down through the heartline, these are a sort of relationship disappointments, and it's lots of short relationships he's had, and they've not lasted because, as I say, he's unable to understand other people's love languages. He doesn't see love in the same way that everybody else does, which is, this is my interpretation anyway, and I feel this is quite unfortunate, because it's not as though that he's a cold person, a person with a heartline like this that stretches beyond and forks into Jupiter is actually someone that's quite idealistic, and he expects of others what he expects of himself. He expects quite a lot of others, but that's because he gives quite a lot of himself as well. So this is not a typical, you wouldn't expect to see you'd expect to see quite a cold, straight, short heart line in someone that's quite emotionally straightforward and cold and unable to exhibit love. And I don't see that with this person, especially with the it's a well-developed mount of Venus, which goes hand in hand with this mount of Mars positive here, and that's because Venus is the lady of battles. She's the lady of love and strife that go hand in hand. When we fight, it's either out of love or hate, and this is love, and this is where hatred comes from. And so sometimes we do things, we are motivated. This entire area here is out of motivation. We are motivated either to do something out of love for our family or friends, or even ourselves, and or we're motivated out of this area of anger, and sometimes that's also coming from a necessary place as well. But the two are intertwined. Now, what is interesting is the double fate line, and this is certainly helpful for those who have a purpose. It shows a strong purpose, and it shows assistance in that purpose. Sometimes it's because typically it's when a person has an underlying ambition, an aim. It can aid towards meeting those aims and achieving those goals. It aids in achievement. But also it's often seen in those that have a secondary, a hobby that they want to turn into a career. And I would perhaps say that that's what this person is doing, but it's obviously with the lifeline stemming from Jupiter and other qualities, it's much more profound than that. And when you look at the career line here, it trails off, reaching more towards lunar, a place of high honors, a place of ambition and high achievements. This person has a goal in mind, and he will do whatever it takes to achieve it. He has a good amount of luck to do that with these double fate lines and with his Mercury line as well. So all things combined here, he's got a lot on his side in order to do what he wants. However, the lifeline appears to end in a couple of different ways. So the lifeline reaches outwards and then bends back in again, and that shows that this person, as he takes his course through life, he quite adventurously makes his mark on the world in a big way, and then begins to retract and pull in again and retreat, and start almost where he left off, back in his native land, back in his home turf, and just down here at the bottom of his fate line, you've kind of got this sort of reddish triangle. It looks that way anyway, and I'll show you in another image. And you could say that the lifeline doubles and forks and reaches outwards, and then you've got this, which does sometimes happen, and also becomes one and the same with the fate line. That does happen. And a fate line that starts down here on Venus is often someone who their role in life was already sort of decided for them by their parents. Um, Also, a career line that joins on to the lifeline shows a very sort of physical career, and that's very typical of people in the military. But this lifeline here, if it does in fact join on to the fate line and become one and the same, it's there's several ways of interpreting this. It's hard to know, but in any case, it could be the end of the Mercury line, and it looks as though it's very red, and it looks like a little sort of triangle, but not quite a triangle. It's sort of like an arrow. It's, you know, this redness which is heated. It shows to me a violent end to his life, I believe. And you know, this combination with it's so, I'm not entirely certain which way his life is going here. Either it's going out here and it's ending in this violent end here, or it's sort of coming out and then coming back in and retracting. I think actually I'm starting to think more the former, and that this that was a terrible line. This Mercury line comes down and meets the end of his lifeline and represents and shows us the end of his life, which is sudden and violent. And I think, you know, being a man of war, being a soldier, being a world leader in this time that he's obviously, you know, at this time of this video, he's obviously involved in quite a worldwide international conflict. It does seem likely that, you know, this is a sort of a likely and obvious end to his life, that it'll end in some sort of bloody manner. So that's where I'm going to conclude on a very positive note. The palm reading and case study for Vladimir Putin. And it's been an interesting one. Has made me think on a few things, particularly with what we're told in the West. I can't help but to sort of question things as well as Putin does as well by nature. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe, and if you have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments below. I'd like to know your thoughts and your feedback, and I'll see you on the next one.